Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of 10 Kids, 2 Docs, Parenting Insights from Pediatrician Moms. I'm Dr. Sylvia Bank.
And I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin. Welcome back, and thank you for joining us for our Season 2 opener.
We want to give you some background about what our podcast is all about and our purpose and what to expect in Season 2.
Sounds great. I'm excited to get this season started.
Let's jump in.
Welcome to the 10 Kids, 2 Docs podcast. Seasoned pediatricians and longtime friends, Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin have counseled thousands of parents and are raising 4 and 6 kids, respectively. Join these doctor moms as they incorporate fun and their combined wisdom and experience to share parenting insights for anyone looking for practical and trustworthy guidance. Please note that this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment from your doctor.
So about a year ago, we got together to begin recording Season 1 of 10 Kids, 2 Docs. And at that time, we discussed our vision for the podcast. The Surgeon General of the United States at that time released an advisory entitled Parents Under Pressure. Our podcast really fit into what the Surgeon General was describing and the needs in our current society. So in this episode, I think it would be more powerful to hear about the Surgeon General's advisory from the Surgeon General himself, Dr. Vivek Murthy. And I'm going to play for you a clip from August 28th, 2024, right after the Surgeon General released his advisory. And this is his interview on the PBS Newshour show.
Raising children can be challenging, but today Surgeon General Vivek Murthy issued an advisory saying it's even more difficult now and it's time to recognize the stress and mental health toll associated with parenting is a serious public health concern for the country. The Surgeon General joins us now to talk about his concerns and his recommendations. It's so great to have you here. Welcome back to the NewsHour.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff.
So there is a baseline level of stress and worry that comes alongside the many joys of parenting, but what's different about the kinds of stress that you're warning about now?
Well, parenting has always been challenging. And to be clear, I say this as a parent myself, parenting is full of joy and meaning and purpose, but it also can be quite stressful. And I've experienced that a lot myself as a parent. What really struck me as I was doing work on youth mental health and talking to families around the country was recognizing how many parents were struggling as well. And as I dug into the data around this, I found that 48%, nearly half of parents, are saying that most days they feel completely overwhelmed by stress. That is an extraordinary number that should raise alarms for all of us. But the other thing that's important to recognize is parents are also struggling with disproportionate levels of loneliness and isolation. So about 65% of parents say that they're lonely, and that includes actually over 75% of single parents. And stress is tough on its own. When you compound it with loneliness, it can really take a toll on the mental health and well-being of parents.
So what are the specific stressors? What are the challenges that this generation of parents are facing in particular?
So there are some of the traditional ones that all generations have faced: worrying about a kid's safety, worrying about how to manage the teenage years, which aren't easy, and financial worries as well. But there are some new ones that this generation is contending with that my parents, for example, didn't have to deal with. How do you manage social media and phones? How do you manage the mental health crisis that kids are facing in terms of depression and anxiety, as well as the loneliness epidemic that's hit kids particularly hard? We're also hearing that the scourge of gun violence is particularly affecting kids as well as their parents. More than half of our children are worried about a school shooting taking place. But you compound all of this, Jeff, with the fact that we are living in a time where the culture of comparison has become intensified, particularly by social media. And so parents are looking online. They're seeing parents who, to their eye, have perfect lives, who aren't struggling with any of the challenges they're dealing with, and they're feeling even more inadequate about their life.
You mentioned how the mental health of parents and caregivers is inextricably linked to the mental health of children. What are the implications?
Well, if we want to address the youth mental health crisis in America, part of that has to involve supporting parents. When parents struggle with their mental health, that has negative implications on the mental health of kids. And all of us have a vested interest in ensuring that kids are well. They are the future of society. And so the work of parenting is directly linked to the future of society. It's why we all have an interest in investing in parental well-being.
How much?
Oh, Sylvia, I'm so glad you found that clip. I really appreciated listening to him. And there were a couple of specific things that he said that really stand out to me now after going through all of season 1 that have been things on my mind more and more as I think about parenting and the parenting topics we discuss and the research we put into some of these topics. And the first one was that he talked about the influence of social media and how parents now have this comparison of other people that they're looking at and thinking that they're being inadequate. And I actually wanted to share with you an article I read in the New York Times just recently. And this was an opinion essay, but it really got me thinking also about the effects of social media and how it affects the stress of parenting. And it was entitled, "There's a Link Between Therapy Culture and Childlessness." It was written by an editor for the Times Opinion. And I really appreciated what she had to say because she was doing this self-reflection. As a teenager who was growing up in the time of abundant social media, she appreciated that almost any struggle you could have as a teen, you could find an opinion out there that related it back to, this is because your parents did this,
Mhm.
right? So I'll read you a quote from this. "Over the past few decades, cultural shift has contributed to a new, nearly impossible standard for parenting. Not only must parents provide shelter, food, safety, and love, but we, their children," she's speaking as herself, "also expect them to get us started on successful careers and even to hold themselves accountable for our mental health and happiness well into our adult years. So I want to suggest that there's another reason my generation, her generation being in those mid 20s, early 30s, dreads parenthood. We've held our own parents to unreachable standards that deep down, maybe we know ourselves would struggle to meet." What she's saying is that in other cases of mental health, as far as anxiety and depression, we are we are at that point now where we're assigning blame to
Mhm.
parents.
Mhm.
And she talks about this voluminous social media that's out there that will point teens and young adults to this idea of, oh, if you feel like you're too shy or introverted, or if you have anxiety around this, let's look back and figure out what your parents did wrong that created
Mm.
that. And so I thought it was a really interesting self-reflection. It really got me thinking about a principle with social media that I hadn't really thought about. And that's that social media has built this idea that all of these decisions we make along the way in parenting are affecting our children's neurodevelopment and mental health. And she's sort of making the point that growing up in that culture, she now fears, how will I ever live up to that standard? And she actually really called that out. She said, "A voluminous academic literature has mined the minutiae of childhood experience to find the sources of personal and social problems in everything from how parents feed their children, bottle or breast, spoon or baby-led weaning, etc." So I saw that in there and thought it tied into these different principles from our season 1, which was this idea that so much of parenting culture has become very child focused and not enough of, well, what's best for the parent, which leads me into the second thing that the Surgeon General said that I really appreciated him saying. And he said, we know that the mental health of parents is directly impacts the mental health of children.
Mhm.
And I hope in season 1, one of my mantras in parenting, one of the things that you and I have said many times is that I'd like to see there be a shift where parents feel the freedom to make decisions really based on what works best for them to be the best parent for their
Right.
child.
Yeah, so when you read the actual document that the Surgeon General published, Parents Under Pressure, he actually says something in the document that kind of is along the same lines of what you're saying. The first thing he says actually is to remember caring for yourself is a key part of how you care for your family. And it's almost like he is also echoing your words here, where parents need to spend some time focusing on themselves.
Yeah.
Parents need to take care of themselves too. And I feel like a lot of our messaging in season 1 was giving parents the okay to not live up to some unattainable standard for parenting, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You and I often came to very different decisions on what we did. And I think we were benefited being pediatricians that we felt the confidence that we could do any of those methods and it was going to be fine for our child. There's not
Mhm.
necessarily one right way to do any of this. So,
Right. And hopefully the perspective in our podcast, given, how you wound up making decisions for your family and how
mhm,
I wound up maybe making different decisions for my family, they're both okay. There's not one exact right way that you raise your child. Parenting is a more dynamic process, and to allow parents the space of doing what they feel like is best for them and their kids, even if it doesn't coincide with what your neighbor is doing, right?
absolutely. And I think now that we have season 1 behind us, I think we're better equipped to maybe tackle a few more of the even more controversial topics in
Yeah.
parenting. So I kind of look forward to you and I starting to discuss some of those.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think another focus, obviously, continuing on in this idea of parents under pressure, there's so many things in parenthood that when any parent encounters them, we know that they're stressful,
Right.
right? And I think you and I in the second half, we should share a little bit about some of those that we've experienced as parents that we envision talking about in season 2, as well as some of those high stressors that you and I have not experienced as parents that we hope to have guests come on to talk about in season 2.
In this second half, I want the listeners to hear how we have experienced pressure moments in our parenting that maybe are different than yours, but just to give an illustration that even pediatricians can be parents under pressure.
Yeah, sounds good. So I think there are some points in parenting that a lot of parents face, right? One of the hardest transitions for me, if not the hardest, was going from no children to one child.
Mhm.
In retrospect, it seems surprising. Like, how hard is it to take care of one baby when you have taken care of 6, right? At a
Right.
time?
But at the same time, going from 0 to 1, you know nothing about being a parent. You get thrown into parenting with no experience. Everything is new and different with the first child.
I have a couple of reasons as I analyze myself as to why I think that was stressful. I mean, number one, it was the biggest change where every decision you're making about how you spend your time is based on you had full freedom to decide my schedule. It was so free. And then all of that changes when you add in the baby. I also felt fairly lonely
Yeah.
because this is why I think this wasn't necessarily the case with my subsequent ones. When you have that first baby, everything about your time is really centered around what you think is best for that baby. And I found myself very focused on her nap and feeding schedule.
I feel like it's a lonely time as well because it can be like a transition time of who they were hanging out with
Right.
before and who they're going to hang out with in the future.
I think another difficulty for me in that transition from 0 to 1 is, which I think a lot of women can relate to. I did have a C-section. I knew I wanted to have multiple children. I was very disappointed that I ended up with a C-section. There
Yeah.
was also the recovery from the C-section, plus just the hormone change after being pregnant and breastfeeding. It was a difficult start and it was painful.
Right. I think that these transition points, like if your birth plan was not what you expected it to be, right?
Yes, yes.
And then of course the breastfeeding, it is it can be painful. It's not always easy. Going from 0 to 1s, there's all those expectations that aren't panning out the way that you thought it would, and that leads to difficulty, right?
Yeah, so I think we could do an entire episode or a few episodes around that transition from
Right.
not having children to having children.
Absolutely. Do you have any other periods in your parenting that you, reflecting on, think was particularly stressful?
Another topic that I think about in my parenting that has been a stressor and a big learning curve for me has been learning how to access special education for my children that have learning disabilities. And I
Mm,
find that this is a question I get asked a lot as a pediatrician and a friend, and it's something that is very much an unknown to a
mhm,
parent until you've experienced it. You know, knowing how to recognize the need to have your child tested, knowing how to navigate the system, knowing what services are out there. It can be very overwhelming. So I
mhm.
really look forward to discussing that where I can share a little bit of my journey as a parent and also hopefully paint a picture to help listeners better understand what's out there with special education and how to navigate that so it's not so stressful and overwhelming.
No, that's a great topic. I look forward to that one.
Honestly, Sylvia, I could spend the entire 20 minutes giving a list of things that have been stressful, that stand out as stressful in parenting. Certainly anything that has to do with screens, anything that has to do with launching young adults. I mean, all of those things. But I am curious to hear from you. What are some of the things in your parenting that stand out to you as stressful points that are apropos to a large base of our listeners as well?
Yeah, for me, one of the most stressful patterns that I've seen in my parenting is when my children get diagnosed with a chronic disease or something that requires more attention. So, the first time this happened was with my first child. He was diagnosed with some food allergies when
Oh,
we
yeah.
started introducing solids. But the thing that wound up being stressful about it was kind of like the focus of food. Food preparation became something that was like a whole separate thing that I had to learn to do. Going out to eat at a restaurant, taking a break from cooking, out to eat was not really a great option when I was worried about food allergy. And just kind of as I was learning to be a first time parent, doing first foods and solids, the food allergy backdrop really put a lot of stress, I think, on my early parenting. An expectation for me, I'm going to be the chef, I'm going to be the doctor, and I'm going to be the mom. That was a particularly stressful time to navigate when my kids were young.
Yeah, I really look forward to us talking about that so that I can learn from you
Mhm.
because the percentage is so high. And I'm sure
Yeah.
even just what you said, there are a lot of listeners out there that completely relate.
Right.
And you mentioned so many different stress points in having a new diagnosis of food allergy. And I look forward to exploring all of those further.
Yeah. The second thing that was really stressful in my parenting, that is still an ongoing stress actually, is having a separate child diagnosed with a chronic disease. That moment when you realize your child has a new diagnosis,
Mm,
be it asthma, be it type 1 diabetes, or inflammatory bowel disease, or something new that you weren't expecting your child to be diagnosed with, that period of transition of diagnosis and management at that time, it creates like this mama bear monster. I don't know how else to describe it. Like every mama bear instinct like gets triggered. You are on full like advocacy mode for this
mm,
child that,
mm,
you're grieving the well child that is now lost. You are advocating and researching online, joining support groups. Like
mm,
you are finding out everything about that disease. And as pediatricians, I know you have noticed this too. Sometimes parents who are non-medical wind up being experts
oh,
on that
absolutely.
disease. Like they know
Absolutely.
everything
Yes.
about the care, the
Yes.
mental health aspect, the specialties. Like they become experts about their child's chronic disease.
Yeah.
And that mama bear mode, that brings out a different type of parent, I think,
Yeah.
in people. Like, no one
Absolutely.
envisions themselves being a
Yeah.
parent of a child of chronic disease, and it it throws you into a different mode of parenting
Mm.
when your child has chronic disease.
Yeah, wow. That's super powerful. I can't wait for us to have time to explore that further.
Yeah. But, it I think it illustrates both how, when we talk about this, Parents Under Pressure advisory, Vivian, you and I are parents under pressure, right?
Mhm,
Like,
mhm.
we've experienced the pressure as well. And, I mean, this is what season 2 is all about. Sharing our story. Hopefully, people out there can relate to some of these pressure experiences that we've had or that our guests on the show will share, and to create like a community of support and understanding around that. Like that is
Yeah.
what I envision for our season 2.
Yeah, I think you hit on another really important part of our vision with the podcast, which is helping target that isolating feeling that parents can have, particularly around a lot of these stressful issues that we are creating a commonality in a community, that we're all
Yeah.
in this together, that we're all experiencing stress in different ways, and hopefully by openly discussing these things and offering advice as pediatricians, we
Yeah.
can mitigate some of that stress for each other.
Yeah, and Dr. Vivek Murthy mentions this in his second point in his Parents Under Pressure document, the section What Parents and Caregivers Can Do. The second part is to nurture connections with other parents and caregivers. Parenting is best done with the support of other parents, family members, and friends. And this is what we're hoping that the podcast does. We can create a support network of anyone out there who feels like they need support in their parenting and people to relate to and stories to share. That's what I'm hoping our season 2 will continue to do.
Yeah, I love it. That gives me chills. I'm
Yeah.
super excited. I hope we can accomplish this mission. So,
Why don't we listen to Dr. Vivek Murthy loop back around and talk about what he sees as a solution to parents under pressure?
sounds good.
Okay.
Finally, I don't want people to lose sight of what we can do as individuals. Because the truth is, all of us have parents in our life. Most of us do.
Yeah.
And when we reach out to those parents, when we help them with basic errands, when we offer to just babysit their kids, even for 15 or 20 minutes, so they can just sit down and take a breath, or take a shower, or get a meal, those are incredibly important moments where we not only provide assistance, but we remind parents that they aren't alone. The truth is, parenting is and has always really been a team sport. It's only in relatively recent years that we've come to put this pressure on parents where they feel that they've got to do all of it by themselves. Otherwise, they're failing as parents. And the truth is, we need each other. We need fellow parents, we need friends, we need family, we need neighborhoods and communities that support parenting. And if we do, then kids, parents, and all of us will be better off.
Parenting is a team sport, is what I hear you say.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much, Jeff.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Again, that's the former U.S. Surgeon General who was in office in 2024 and released the advisory that we've been talking about, Parents Under Pressure. That's him speaking. I love what he had to say. I hope that we can continue to build community and remind ourselves and listeners that we are all in this parenting journey together.
This is 10 Kids, 2 Docs. I'm Dr. Sylvia Bank.
And I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to 10 Kids, 2 Docs, hosted and created by Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and recommend our podcast to other listeners. Visit our website at 10kids2docs.com, where you can find links to social media and leave comments or suggestions. Back next week with more topics in parenting.